Hello, and thank you for joining today's demo, the Mobility Training Series session, Mobility 101 Provision. This is the first demo in a three-part series designed to get you started with enrollment and policy setting first, then take a deep dive on mobile app management and content collaboration, and then finally, how to achieve full mobile maturity. My name is Kayla Heineman, and I'm your webinar master moderating today's webinar. Lindsay Elgie, our mobile master from IBM, will be walking you through the MobileFirst Protect, formerly Mass 360 portal, in just a minute. Real quick, just a few housekeeping items before we begin. This webinar is expected to last 1 hour and is in listen-only mode. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so if you have a question, be sure to post it publicly in the Q&A widget at the bottom corner of your screen. You can select this by choosing the red Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. You can toggle that on and off if you want to not look at it at the moment and just watch Lindsay's presentation. We are recording today's presentation, and we'll make the link to the recording available by email. Now, real quick, I just want to introduce IBM MobileFirst Protect, formerly Mass 360, to those of you not familiar with the product. The IBM MobileFirst Protect platform delivers a complete enterprise mobility management solution. This one platform integrates comprehensive security to enhance employee productivity on their mobile devices and give organizations the confidence that their sensitive data is protected. There's 4 key solution bundles for total enterprise mobility. First, in the upper left, is advanced management. It enables organizations to manage and secure enterprise-owned and personal bring-your-own smartphones, tablets, and laptops. It simplifies deploying private and public apps by delivering an easy-to-use enterprise app catalog with full security and operational lifecycle management. The Secure Productivity Suite delivers a comprehensive set of cross-platform solutions to isolate and contain work emails, web access, and app data to prevent data leaks. It's the only complete solution that enables employees to securely access corporate data while preserving the mobile experience on their devices. Secure Document Sharing provides a secure encrypted container and productivity suite to distribute, view, create, edit, and share documents on mobile devices, giving organizations the control they need and employees the access demand. The Mobile Enterprise Gateway offers simple and secure access to behind-the-firewall business resources, such as SharePoint, Windows File Share, Internet sites, and databases. And we're excited about our newest product, Mobile Threat Management. Mobile malware is the next big security threat to every enterprise. Mobile Threat Management detects, analyzes, and remediates mobile risks, including malware, suspicious system configurations, and compromised jailbroken and rooted devices. Through integration with IBM Security Trusteer, leveraged by hundreds of millions of end users to protect organizations against fraud and data breaches, IBM MobileFirst Protect provides a new layer of mobile security to enterprise mobility management. So all these services work together seamlessly and provide multiple layers of management and security and granular level policy options for you to configure. So it truly is the most comprehensive enterprise mobility management platform in the market. Okay, so enough for me. We're going to go ahead and let Lindsay take over here and dive into the portal. Lindsay?
Perfect. Thank you, Kayla. I'm going to share out my screen in just one moment. And Kayla, you can let me know when you can see it. There we go. Okay, Kayla, you should see that in just one moment. Can you let me know when you do?
Yep, just finished buffering and we're in the portal.
Okay, perfect. So this is our Mass 360 admin console. So Mass 360 is primarily a cloud-based solution, or I'm sorry, MobileFirst Protect, formerly Mass 360. We're a cloud-based solution primarily. We do have customers all over the world that work with our product, from anything from disabling cameras through policy to providing that secure container for BYOD devices. The web portal we're looking at today is our login for the administrator's console, and this gives you the ability to manage your devices really from any web browser that you'd like to use. So in terms of the easeability, the scalability, it's all here in the cloud solution. You do have the ability also to configure your deployment settings to really reflect what you're looking for in your environment. So this allows you to do things like provide authentication against your corporate directory using our Cloud Extender tool. You can specify what platforms can enroll. You can prompt for ownership as to whether this is a corporate device, a corporate shared device, or a personal device. We also have self-enrollment where we can leverage those familiar credentials, things like Apple Configurator and Device Enrollment Program, and then some basic help desk information if you want your users to be able to reach out, in addition to configuring things like an end-user self-service portal. So all of these settings will be in your corporate deployment settings here. You have the ability as well to configure what services you'd like to utilize with Mass 360. So anything from our basic of NVM, which we're going to go over today, or laptop and desktop management, to coordinating mobile content management from a resource like a SharePoint, and even expense management for data usage tracking. So once your services are configured here, you have the ability to hop onto our homepage and start your customization of the portal. From the Alert Center itself, you have these tiles that you can customize based on what you'd like to keep an eye on in your environment. The red and green are more compliance related, so maybe a security concern or something you'd want to take action on. The blue tiles are a little more informational for you, or kind of neutral. So if you wanted to keep track of maybe inventory purposes, who's on which carrier for corporate provided devices, that would be a great use case for those blue tiles as well. You can have as many of these tiles as you'd like, and you can create your alerts as you see fit. You can also create device groups from these alerts, and you can also pull location information right from the home page here. So if you'd like to see where everyone's checked in at the time, if you'd like to maybe set a geofence and keep an eye on who's roaming for your data usage purposes, you can do that from here as well. And then we also have the ability to configure privacy settings that let us enable and disable that based on ownership or even groups. So if we have a concern maybe about the personal devices that we're pulling into the portal reporting on location information, we can restrict the collection of that information. So you can see here that's going to be your physical address, GPS coordinates and history, IP address, and even SSID information. So click box to turn that on. You can specify the ownership that you'd like to disable this for, or group-based device groups here that you would not like to collect that information on. So you can make sure that you're not infringing on anyone's privacy concerns there. We can restrict application inventory as well. This is going to be related to our device inventory record, where we're showing all applications that are collecting across a certain device. So if we pull up a particular device here and we go into their summary, we'll be able to see application inventory if that is not disabled. So if for some reason you'd like to keep an eye on the applications that are maybe being installed across a personal device or a device that's provided by the company, you can view that from here. We can leverage that privacy filter just as easily. Since we're in the summary here, a couple of other things that are always of interest. Hardware and operating system will be great for inventory tracking purposes. This gives you a rundown of your serial numbers, your firmware versions, your manufacturer, even your internal storage and battery levels here. You'll also have OS information, API levels, OS versions, active sync IDs as well. So that's handy to have at a glance. We do also have security and compliance, where a lot of pertinent information will be housed in terms of maybe a jailbroken or rooted device, or encryption levels, which policies are applied to this device, and even which settings are configured. We can also see that the Google Drive configuration has failed here, so this might be used for troubleshooting purposes as well. In terms of threat management, this is IBM's Trusteer service. So this allows us to set compliance around malware detected on a device. So we will have a rundown here in the device record of what that looks like. We can see the last time that this has been updated, what the configuration is, and if we've got any violations that have been detected here. So you can see this iPad's in good shape. If we had any detections, we would see them here in red. ActiveSync, pretty self-explanatory. If we're using an ActiveSync device, we'll have a record here. We do also have network information, so this is going to tie into that data usage and expense monitoring, in addition to keeping track of things like a phone number, an ICCID, or carrier detail. This is a Wi-Fi only device, so we're not seeing any of that information necessarily, but we will see things like your MAC address, your SSID, even your MAC address up above for your Wi-Fi. So again, just visibility for you in terms of troubleshooting or concerns that you might have in terms of whose device is checked in where. Location information, again, this is going to depend on your privacy settings within the portal. We do have the ability to provide what we call a breadcrumb trail. So this is going to be a history of where this device has checked in over a period of time. So, for example, I can go in and see the last 7 days of Teresa's iPad here, see where exactly she's checked in. And that check-in means that we are actually seeing the location check-in of the device level GPS. So what that means for iOS in this circumstance is that if the device is on the move, we're going to see that check-in every 1 mile. If the device is sitting idly, we're going to see it check in every 4 hours. So I think that that's pretty conservative in terms of battery life. We're not overexerting the device. We're leveraging Apple's timers there. For Android devices, we can actually change that timer if we'd like. Default's at 60 minutes, but we can go down as far as every 15 minutes, which we'll sometimes see with like a transit company or maybe a fleet of tablets that's being deployed that needs to check in more frequently. Maybe companies will give them a charger and have them check in more frequently at the expense of the battery life, but seeing that more frequent device record and the location information. We can also see that Find My Device is disabled, so this is going to be tied into that activation lock for the Apple ID on iOS devices. So if you have any trouble with that corporate device that maybe has locked into a personal Apple ID, you'll be able to see whether that feature is enabled or not and even report on that maybe in your alert center. For supervised DEP devices, we will actually have the option of clearing that activation lock out and even personalizing some of the information right from the portal in our device actions. For applications installed, we talked briefly about disabling this feature for privacy reasons. If you'd like to collect this information, this will show you all applications installed across your devices. So if you have concerns about which apps are being used or maybe productivity on a particular device, you'll be able to see the apps that are installed. We will also be able to see the app distributions that you might be sending out for corporate purposes. So if you'd like to keep an eye on whether an application has been installed or not, you can see that from the distributed as well. And this will always be displayed. Even if you have that privacy filter leveraged for the personal application installs, you'll be able to see which apps have been pushed out for enterprise purposes through Mass 360. In terms of documents downloaded, this relates to our Secure Productivity Suite, which we'll touch on a little down the road in our presentations here in our webinars. But we will have that visibility from the device records. So documents may be coming from a Google Drive or Box for Enterprise, OneDrive for Business, even file shares and SharePoints behind your firewall. So you'll get a good rundown of who's got access to which documents here. Then you'll also have certificate rundowns and even browser history if you're utilizing the Mass 360 Secure Browser. So that's part of the Secure Productivity Suite as well, but you will have this history and even what's been blocked through that browser from the device record itself. Now, the mobile data usage will give you a rundown of the data that's been consumed on a particular device, and you'll be able to see the plan that's applied and even set compliance around that data usage. So we'll go through that in our compliance rules a little bit later in today's presentation. One thing I did want to touch on is custom attributes. The attributes that are preloaded in the portal are extremely helpful in terms of keeping track of some common enterprise filters, but if you have something a little more specific to your environment, we can help you load that into the portal and you can keep track of it right from Mass 360 rather than having to keep separate Excel spreadsheets or maybe a different database or a portal to log into. You'll be able to see it right from Mass 360. You'll be able to search for it, create device groups, and even create dynamic rules about it. So really helpful if there's a particular asset tracking tag that you utilize in your environment. The last thing I wanted to show from the device record summary here is the history. This is really great for compliance reasons because you will get a nice history of all of the actions that have been pushed down to this device. So I have my active sync approval here. I've got a lot of people checking location on Teresa's tablet, and you will be able to export this if you need to. So if you've got maybe HIPAA concerns and you want to make sure that a device has been wiped of patient information, you'll have the record of when that wipe was actually executed. Now, in terms of the MDM actions, that's going to be on our right-hand side. So again, remote lock, reset of a device passcode. On Android devices, you'll actually be able to set a new passcode right from the portal and then disclose that to someone who's supposed to be accessing that locked device. So for Apple, we're clearing out that passcode and letting the end users choose the new one. But on Android, if we needed to effectively lock someone out of that device, we could choose the new passcode and not give it to the end user. So that could be helpful in HR situations, for example. The selective wipe here, so this is going to be pretty critical for personal devices in the mix because this allows you to remove only company-provided information. So what happens with a selective wipe is that everything that has been distributed or configured by Mass 360 is then removed from that device. We're not fully wiping the device. We're not touching photos or text messages or personal email addresses or anything of that nature. We're simply removing the Mass 360 policies and configurations from that device that was provided by your organization. The nice thing about the selective wipe is that it is revocable. So if you issue the selective wipe and maybe your end user has simply lost their smartphone and they find it a couple hours later, you can actually hop back into the portal and revoke that selective wipe and push those configurations right back down to the end user. So definitely a time saver for you from the help desk perspective. Now, if you have someone that's simply being offboarded from the company, maybe they're changing positions or leaving the company, we do have a remove control feature as well, which will remove all Mass 360 control from the device, in addition to removing the corporate information using that selective wipe. So this is a nice way to part ways. You don't have that traditional exchange wipe that has zapped every piece of information off of that device, but you know that they're not taking any pertinent company information with them as they leave the company. Now again, here you can see some shortcuts for distributing applications and documents, AirPlay setting, changing policies and rule sets, and even data plans. We also have a buzz command that will sound an alarm on this device. Really helpful maybe if a phone's been left in the lunchroom or fallen under a car seat. We also have the message feature, which I think is really great and maybe even underrated around here, because this does allow you to send a message to one user device, but we can also create device groups and send messages that way. So maybe if you're a transportation or logistics company and your users don't have email, but you still need to communicate to them, you could send group-based messages to the device level without having to rely on an email on the device. Now again, this locate on the right-hand side, this is just a snapshot of where this device is last checked in. If you're leveraging that privacy filter, you won't be able to see this information, but you will have this record if you need to export for some reason. You'll be able to screenshot, you'll be able to take that information for maybe a police report for a missing device even. So hopefully if you need to leverage the location information, you'll have that capability, and we can help you out a little bit with missing devices. Now, in terms of the user directory, we do have the ability using the Cloud Extender tool, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, to integrate with an Active Directory LDAP. So we can use that. You can see here we can pull in that directory, your users, your groups, your OUs. You can leverage that to assign policies, distribute applications and documents, and really streamline the experience for your end user as well, because when they get an enrollment request, they're going to be prompted for those AD credentials rather than kind of a generic one-time use passcode. You can also partner those procedures up and make a two-time authentication if you'd like to use the passcode and the AD credentials, but it will certainly help ease the user into the Mass 360 enrollment, and then they'll just have a short 2 to 3 minute enrollment process to get their device actually managed by Mass 360. In terms of the policies, we have a couple of different policies that we can touch on. Today is going to be focused around our MDM policies for iOS, Android, and Windows Phone, Mac, and also Windows 10 devices. So you can see our MDM policies here. We do have a legacy BlackBerry policy as well, which we're not really going to touch on today, but we do have that option if you've got a mixed environment. To start out, I do want to touch on the Windows Phone policy, because this is something fairly new for us, where we have the ability to provide configurations and policy for Windows 10 devices. Now, right now, it's falling under our Windows Phone policy. This will be broken out into a Windows 10 policy, a little bit more generic for your devices. But you can see the right-hand side, the badges here. These are features that are supported by the Windows 10 devices as you go through. So you now have the ability to configure the traditional laptop management, which has always been the lock, locate, and wipe, pushing messages, distributing packages, even patch deployment using our Big Fix integration. But today we can actually configure policies for Windows 10 that helps to start set restrictions around corporate devices and even configure delivery of ActiveSync, for example, providing you the ability to selective wipe your corporate information from even like a Windows 10 tablet or a Surface, for example. Now, we also have policies, again, for our iOS and our Android devices. These are going to be very similar to your OS 10 policy as well. So while we're talking about the laptops and the desktops, we do have that capability to configure those policies and deliver that information. We also have some settings and restrictions in our OS 10 policy that are a little more security related. I'll open this up here. We can see things like app compliance, configuring our app store if we'd like to do that. System preferences will let us go through and establish exactly what we'd like that user to have control over. So if we select this option, we can check off, what we do and don't want them to have access to in that system preferences. Again, this is for Mac, so this is going to be kind of a nice little bundle handed to us from Apple, where we can really streamline the deployment of the Mac, the iOS, even the Android and Windows Phone if this is an all-inclusive environment. We do also support DEP for iOS and Mac OS X today. So again, streamlining that enrollment process for you so that your devices are going into Mass 360 easily, you're enrolling them easily, and you've got that control as soon as possible. I'm going to pull up an iOS policy here, and we can go through the features from the mobile device perspective, and then we'll take a look at the compliance that we can set around those policies as well. Now, from the device level settings, again, this is going to depend a lot on the environment that we're working with. One thing that's nice is that we'll always have a team of engineers available to help you work through best practices and configuring your policies. Our customer support is available 24/7, 365 at no charge to our trial or full customers. So we always encourage you to reach out if you want to trial Mass 360 or test this out. We'll help you configure these policies exactly how you're looking to deploy Mass 360. You can see here we just start with a basic passcode requirement. So if you'd like to make sure that any devices that are accessing corporate resources do have at least a 4-digit passcode, for example, you can set that expectation here in your policy and then push those down to your mobile devices. Now, in terms of restrictions, this is an area where we've essentially taken the APIs provided to us from these vendors and worked them into a policy where you can check on and off these features you'd like to allow or disallow. So things like installation of applications, turning off the public app store if you need to, the use of camera and FaceTime, Siri, Touch ID, just some common concerns. Now this again is an iOS policy, so we're seeing iOS features, and we're also seeing on the right-hand side the iOS versions that are compatible with these features. So for example, allows Control Center and lock screen is iOS 7 and above. Now we do also have a really great feature provided from Apple. This is open managed to unmanaged and vice versa. You can see here allow files from managed applications and accounts to be opened in unmanaged applications. If we don't want to allow that communication, we can uncheck this box. Now basically what managed applications means is that it has been deployed and installed through Mass 360. So that means it's a work application. It can open work information. If it is unmanaged and did not come from Mass 360, it cannot open managed information. So this is a big one for iOS users to make sure that your information stays in the hands of the organization. Application compliance here allows us to build a blacklist or a whitelist if we'd like to set restrictions around apps that are on the devices. For example, if maybe you have an opposition to Facebook being installed for productivity reasons, we can grab Facebook and we can blacklist this app. We can also add additional applications if we just have a few that we want to restrict from being used on these maybe provided devices. So Facebook and Instagram are not blacklisted. We wouldn't normally see a blacklist and a whitelist here. We would see kind of an either-or situation. But a really great example of a whitelist would be maybe we want to whitelist all the Mass 360 applications from our secure productivity suite, and we don't really want the user using any other applications on this device. So easy enough to go through. It pulls right from the public app store and our app catalog if we've deployed them already. And it allows us to configure these blacklists or whitelists pretty easily and push these down to our end users' devices. Now, often with personal devices, we wouldn't see restrictions actually being placed in terms of the applications being used, but we could configure required apps so that if a device is in compliance, it's got these applications that are required for work purposes. If the end user removes that application for some reason, then we're alerted and we've got an out-of-compliance device. The ActiveSync here, pretty self-explanatory. We're configuring ActiveSync server for delivering mail configurations. This will allow us to push this information, and the end user will just need to authenticate to receive their mail on that device. Now, if we issue a selective wipe, we can then remove that configuration and anything that's in that mailbox at the time. So really nice for personal devices. We can issue that selective wipe. We don't have to worry about whether we're wiping photos and text messages. And from company devices, if you lose a device or it's misplaced or maybe it's being redistributed to a new end user, we've got the selective wipe as kind of another convenient tool. We did talk about Trusteer earlier. This is the compliance around malware detection. So again, very simple to implement. It's just a checkbox here. It's then turned on when this policy is published. And this allows us to set that compliance so that we are referencing a known database of malware signatures compiled by trusteer. So if we detect that one of those applications has been installed, we then have a compliance event that's occurring, and we'll touch on compliance rules where we can take that action automatically. This area here is for any applications that are being flagged that we want to bypass. So for example, if we've maybe got carrier bloatware that's been installed in a device and it's flagging as malware because of something that it's able to access, we can flag that for an exception so that it doesn't go off as a red flag every time we run that trusteer integration. The Wi-Fi here, this allows us to configure Wi-Fi networks for our end users. We can see the SSID. We'll be able to push the password if it's required. One nice thing is that we have the password hidden so that the end user can't see that password if you don't want them to. That way, if you issue that selective wipe, you've removed that password from their device and they've never seen it, so you don't have to worry about having to reset that network password if someone leaves the company. Also really helpful if you have to change your password to your network every 60 or 90 days. You can just push that through a policy update rather than having to let everyone in the company know that the password is changing again. VPN configurations work very similarly. You just set that configuration within the portal, and then it pushes right down to your end users for device-level VPN settings. We can configure AirPrint settings from the portal here, so IP address, resource path. We also have advanced settings where we have, for example, AirPlay settings. We can also configure email for things like POP and IMAP, web clips, which are really helpful because this is kind of an icon that will look like an application, but it will be actually a link to a specific URL or shortcut. So really nice if you're not necessarily able to use our secure browser and push bookmarks, you can still push web clips for those shortcuts to the end users as they're enrolling in Mass 360. We do have some other miscellaneous settings here, cellular settings, web domains, fonts, advanced settings. So again, you're going to kind of pick through here and configure the policies as you see fit. One thing I do always like to touch on with our iOS devices, though, is our supervised settings. This allows us to come in and see device settings that are configurable only for supervised devices from either Apple Configurator or Device Enrollment Program. So what that means is that the device has either physically been plugged into a Mac and run through Apple Configurator, or it has come through the Device Enrollment Program, which basically indicates to Apple that this is an organizational device rather than a personal device. So under restrictions, we have things like Game Center, Bookstore, Erotica, configuration profile installation, iMessage. These are things that can be turned off or on only on supervised devices. A big one is this activation lock, removing applications, and even some new iOS 9 settings that are really helpful in terms of Apple Watch pairing, automatic app downloads, and this one down at the bottom is a pretty big one for us. Allow trust of enterprise applications. We can push applications now, in addition, through Mass 360 while turning off the public App Store. So you can see here, allow the usage of the iOS App Store. If this feature is disabled, apps can be loaded by iTunes and Configurator or through Mass 360. So we can essentially take a DEP supervised device, turn off that public App Store, but still send public applications, which was traditionally a pretty big roadblock for us. So Apple's definitely leaning more towards the enterprise with some of these settings, modifying Touch ID fingerprints, and then again you have things like App Lock that are specific to these supervised devices that allows us to basically choose an application so that when that device is powered on, it cycles into a specific app here. So really great example might be a bank lobby using a specific application for internal reasons, maybe a logistical company that is utilizing an app for transit purposes, and then some configurations for wallpaper down below as well. So that about sums up our iOS policy. We will have similar policies again for our Android and Windows phone. We did briefly look at our Windows phone. Android will look pretty similar, to be honest. It's really up to the vendors which APIs they're providing to MDM providers. But you will see similarities in terms of things like your camera, turning off voice control, audio and video recording, passcode requirements. The one thing I always like to show the Android policy because you'll see it's a lot more fragmented here. Lots of safe badges. So Samsung safe devices are certainly in the forerunner in the enterprise environment in terms of what we can and can't do. but lots of indicators of which OS version or APIs support which features. So things like automatic backups to Google or automatic restores, even factory resets on Samsung Safe devices. Screen capture can be disabled if we want. We can turn off that public app store on the Safe devices. And then we have things like forcing device-level encryption where that hardware allows. So again, similar features in some respects, but some that are specific to the Android devices as well. Restrictions, this is where you're going to see the device level restrictions and probably some similarities to the iOS policy we just looked at. Camera settings, for example, audio and video. Wi-Fi is a big one for Android devices because we can disable the Wi-Fi settings on cellular devices if we want to. We have concerns about who's connecting to which networks. We have a little bit of control there. Again, USB. We also have the ability to disable or lock onto location detection, for example. So we do have a little bit of an upper hand in some respects for these Android devices over the iOS limitations, but we can certainly work around any restrictions that you're working for and try to get you into the same end result there. App compliance, again, this is just your blacklist, your whitelist, your required apps. Similar in concept, we will, though, have the ability to set some actions on specific Android OS versions. So, for example, Android 4 to 4.4, we can block an application from being used. This does also leverage the application name, and then we'll plug in the app ID from the Google Play Store, and then we build our blacklist or our whitelist. Now, Trusteer, again, is going to be enabled through policy. You see here, though, we do have a remediation action that we can take on Android devices. So this uninstall application on Samsung devices will automatically uninstall an app that's been flagged by Trusteer as a restricted app. For non-safe devices, we will basically prompt the user to uninstall the application and let them know that they've got malware installed. It will be up to them to remove that application, but we'll still have a compliance event taking place, and those compliance rules we're going to touch on momentarily. A couple of things I wanted to touch on the Android policy specifically. This device management area of the policy is specific to Android, and it's not present in the iOS policy, and it does allow us some pretty powerful settings, like not allowing the user to disable MDM. So this is really big for company-provided devices that need to be locked into MDM. That user can't just hop into settings and remove that. Now, if they do, we have visibility if we don't have the ability to disable MDM management, but if we can prevent that, we would like to through policy. Application timers, this is the area I was referring to earlier with our location collection. We have the ability to configure this on Android devices where we don't necessarily have that luxury on iOS. Again, this is still impacting the battery usage on the device if we're lowering this number here, but some companies need that more frequent device location check-in over the battery usage. Now, the advanced settings here are very similar: pop and IMAP configurations, wallpapers, lock screen configurations. One thing I did want to show is network settings for Samsung Safe devices particularly, because we looked at the policy earlier where we can block the addition of Wi-Fi networks. This allows us to actually go in and whitelist and blacklist SSIDs or set minimum security levels for those networks. So it does give you a little bit of an upper hand on those safe devices to set some security around that if you have concerns about people joining open networks, for example. Now, the kiosk mode I definitely wanted to touch on. This is a pretty big one for a lot of our customers. The kiosk mode in Android does not require any additional configuration. So on iOS, we have app lock for supervised. On Android, we have kiosk built right into that Android policy based on the APIs that have been provided to us. So we actually have a couple of different options here. One is to automatically launch a required app and lock the display into this application. So that's going to be similar to that app log we looked at, where on a Samsung Safe device specifically, we can choose an app ID and the device will launch into that application and will not be able to leave it. Now, on non-safe devices, we can create a home page with allowed applications. So that could be one app, and the difference is that it's not going to launch into that application. It's going to launch into what we call a custom launcher, and the end user will just have to launch that application. So they're still only going to be able to get to that one app, but the nice thing is that you can also create multiple applications on that launcher. So if I've got 5 work-related applications that I want that end user to be able to access and nothing else on that device, I can come down and whitelist those app IDs here from my kiosk, and then I can block things like multi-window mode, task manager, system bar, status bar, to make sure that the end user has a lot of these features disabled on their devices. We do have Samsung Nous settings here, so we can configure Nous for these devices if you're using the program already. Things like requiring a passcode, setting your restrictions. This will all look very similar if you're familiar with the Nous policies here, app compliance. And again, this is specific to the Samsung Nous side of the device. So on top of anything that we've done through policy, you also have these Nous settings through your licensing. Now we do also have Android for Work settings that we can configure. So if you're partaking in the Android for Work program, we can plug in that license key through our settings, and we can configure things like your passcode, your security, any restrictions you'd like to utilize. And this is essentially creating that dual persona on the device level by creating a separate partition essentially for that device's work side. So really nice program from Google. We do have integration today, and if that's something that you're using or interested in using, you can reach out to us and we can get you more information on that, and even do a one-on-one demo for you if you're interested in seeing the ins and outs of that integration. So now that we've looked at our MDM policies, I wanted to go into those compliance rules. So again, we go through our policies, we set up what our expectations are, and then we have compliance rules that can take some actions for us if a device falls out of compliance for some reason. So in just a minute, you'll see my compliance rules load. I have some basic settings where I can specify the platforms that this is applicable to, who should receive the notifications if a device does go out of compliance. And down here, it's a big one, exemption. Maybe your CIO should never lose access to email, even if he jailbreaks his iPhone. We can make sure that his device is set as an exempt device so that you know he's jailbroken in his iPhone, but he's not in a big meeting losing access to his email. Now, the enforcement rules allow us to come in here and set some visibility and even some actions over some common enterprise concerns. Really good example, application compliance for iOS. We created a blacklist that says that we don't want Instagram installed on our devices, if you remember earlier in the presentation. So what happens if a user installs Instagram is that we have a compliance event take place. This application compliance rule allows us to configure what will happen to that device. So maybe we want to start with an alert, hey, for company policy, we do not want you installing Instagram. If you don't remove this application in 4 hours, this is what's going to happen. 4 hours later, this is what's going to happen. So we can even change the policy if we want, and this is kind of a nice approach for something that's productivity related because you can start stripping away some of the features that might be fun on the devices. Maybe if you install Instagram, we remove your camera, or we enforce a 10-digit passcode. I know I don't ever want to have to input a 10-digit passcode on my device, so I'm pretty quick to remove that application. Now, if this is a personal device and maybe we just don't want certain applications interacting with our company information, we could even perform a selective wipe if this is being very restrictive. So we see this a lot on even company-provided devices that really shouldn't be accessing risky apps. We can make sure that your information is not exposed to that. We do also have detection for jailbroken or rooted devices. So if we see that one of these devices has been compromised within Mass 360, we can take those same actions. Now for something like this, if it's security related, we may want to take that automatic selective wipe. So Mass 360 detects that a device has been compromised. We don't want to jeopardize the integrity of your company data, so we selectively wipe it from the device and only personal information is left behind on that compromised device. Now, the nice thing about the compliance rules is that once these devices are back into compliance, these actions are going to reverse themselves automatically and restore to what the normal policies or actions or enforcements would be. So as the administrator, you know that what's going on within the portal, but you don't actually have to come in and take any action or babysit devices and wait for them to go back into compliance and push those settings again. One rule that I do also like to talk about is our enrollment rule, because this ties into our Cloud Extender feature that I talked about earlier. Cloud Extender is a software service that we provide to our customers, and we have the ability to integrate with mail systems using our Cloud Extender. And with our Active Sync visibility, we can see devices that are connecting back to your mail server, and we can also set compliance around enrollment into Mass 360. So if we see that a device is not enrolled in Mass 360, or maybe control has been removed from Mass 360 and they're trying to receive email via Active Sync, we can block email delivery using Cloud Extender and PowerShell, and we can even send a new enrollment request that says, hey, you need to enroll in Mass 360 before you can get that mail. Now, we can even go a step further and say that if you're using our secure container, we will not allow you to get this mail via the native client. So there's lots of configurations and security using Cloud Extender. And the nice thing is it's a very lightweight executable, utilizes only outbound port 443. So we don't require any appliances. We don't have to change anything in your mail environment. We're just going to take Active Sync and plug it into our policies and set rules around that enrollment here. Now, we do have geofencing, which is location-based policy and enforcement actions. So we can take an action that says maybe these are company devices that should never leave the building. If we see that the device has left the building, we want to immediately remove our company information. This is especially helpful also in schools where maybe these are library devices that shouldn't be leaving the library, or even we've had casinos and bars and restaurants that use tablets for ordering. We wouldn't want any of that saved payment information or even proprietary applications to reach the public hands. This is also very helpful just for visibility. You'll get a notification that a device has left a geofence. Expense monitoring allows us to set compliance around data usage. So if we see that maybe we've got some people abusing the system, we can set an expense plan here that says these devices should have this much data, and then we can set different thresholds where we're taking action based on that data usage. So a lot of companies like this for visibility alone, just, hey, this is how much we've used so far this month, just wanted to let you know. If you have repeat offenders, you can even come in here and take actions like changing the policy to take away some of those features and functionality that may be contributing to the data overages. At least slow them down a little bit. We can't block or throttle data based on carrier limitations, but we could certainly make them aware of the situation and even take away some of the luxuries that they might be using that data for. So that's a good rundown of the compliance rules. We talked about privacy as well. We do have application and document distribution. That's going to be coming down the road in our next webinar in the series. But I did want to touch briefly on our reporting as well, because this is a really great area for visibility over your environment. And since we have such a mix of devices today, you'll see your laptops, your mobile devices, your desktops, all in one place. We can pull in our inventory of our devices. We can keep an eye on OS versions if that's of concern. So there really is a few different visual representations that we can choose from for each of our reports. And then our detailed reports are a little bit more spreadsheet oriented. So if you do want to create a report here, you want to see a complete inventory of your devices and then export for one-time use, you can do that here, or you can create subscriptions. This is really great actually for our data usage reporting, because you have the ability to deliver this data usage analysis of who's used how much data, even on a daily basis, and send it right to the inbox of whoever processes your carrier bill. So if you've got repeat offenders, again, they'll have these backups of your reports on a monthly basis, showing any overages that might have occurred, even charging back to their departments if you'd like. You can plug in their email addresses here and even how frequently they should get this breakdown. There's also a wealth of PC and laptop reporting, so if you want to see who's disabled their firewall or maybe antivirus definitions that are out of date, you'll have that visibility from the reporting as well. And again, you can configure your more detailed version and even customize if you'd like. So you can specify exactly what should be in your reports here. The last thing I wanted to touch on is under our Setup tab, we talked about setting up your portal itself. I did want to touch on the admin roles. This allows us to configure permissions for a specific administrator we'd like to add to have access to our portal. So we do have some baked-in roles: help desk, administrator, document distribution, and then we can create more specific roles. So I'll just plug in Lindsay Test here. And this will allow me to move forward to actually choosing permissions and rights that this administrator should have. So a really great example, maybe we want someone who only deals with expense management. We can give them access only to the expense management modules of our portal and maybe the reporting as well. But this can make it very specific for you so that no one has too much access to your portal, but you still get to delegate out that access so that people can help you out with their job permissions here. So it's kind of a broad tour in terms of provisioning your devices from Mass 360. Before I hop off, I just wanted to show you the add device workflow here so that you see that really what we're doing is we're pushing down the policies that should be configured to this device. It's a URL-based enrollment where the end user will authenticate, accept terms and conditions, and then install the Mass 360 application, and then they're good to go. And anything that you set to distribute through Mass 360 will automatically push to their devices. So it should really be a matter of just a few minutes to get that device enrolled and up and running, and then you should be moving forward with Mass 360 after that point. Kayla, I think that wraps it up from the portal perspective. I'll hand things back to you so I can take a look and see if we have any questions that have come in.
Excellent. Thanks, Lindsay. So while Lindsay's taking a break here and reviewing the questions that came in, I do want to remind everybody that this is the first part of a three-part series. So we've created this new series designed to introduce you to these, enrollment and policy features first, and then next time Mobility 201, Productivity, is on Thursday, December 10th at 10 o'clock Eastern. We'll take the time to walk you through mobile application management and content collaboration. So we'll take a deep dive into that. So if you haven't already registered for that session, I definitely urge you to register for the second session in the series. Even if you can't attend, register anyway, because we'll send you the recording so you can view it on demand. We'll include the link to register for the next session in the follow-up email that we'll be sending out this week. That email will include today's recording and slides, and then the registration URL for the next event in the series. So watch your inbox for that. We're going to dedicate the rest of the time here to your questions, so get those into the Q&A widget. If you've minimized that box, you can bring it back up by selecting that red Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. So we'll dedicate the rest of the time here to your questions. Lindsay, back to you.
Thanks, Kayla. We do have some questions coming in here. I have one regarding locations in someone's portal. That is something that you should be able to see from your portal. I understand that you're probably either in trial or a customer with Mass 360. If there's a feature that we've talked about today that you do not have, please reach out to us, because we do have the ability to enable, and we can discuss how that will impact your portal or even your users if that feature is not currently enabled. But we can certainly help you out with that to get you access to any of the features that you need. And that will come from our customer engineering team, so there's never any charge for you to reach out like that to help to get some help on your portal. I see, is it possible to have separate security policies for 2 different Android devices? It is definitely possible. We encourage you to have as many policies as you need to make sure that you're setting appropriate restrictions and configurations for your devices. So we have some companies that have one policy that is appropriate for everyone. We have some customers who have 15, 20 different policies depending on how many users and devices they have. So we can certainly have those policies configured for different devices based on how you want to manage them. A really great example of that also is based on ownership. We wouldn't want to put the same restrictions on a personal device that we would maybe on a company-provided device, where we would have a little bit more control. So we can certainly help you out if you are currently working in a Mass 360 portal, or we can have a little bit more of an in-depth conversation with you if you're looking to get some additional details on those Android devices. I do also have a question regarding the device enrollment program from Apple. Device enrollment program is it's basically a program that comes from Apple. There's no charge to sign up for a DEP portal, and Apple has DEP resellers. So I know one of them, for example, is Verizon. So if you're getting iOS devices from Verizon, you have the ability to get them through the DEP program so that they're locked into MDM management, and you can plug them right into our portal with the handshake via your DEP token. That way we can automatically push policies. So a really great use case would be maybe ordering a new device for a new employee. You've got these company-provided iOS devices. You order that device from Verizon. You're already in DEP. That device ships out to your end user. They open it up. They plug in their AD credentials, and they're managed by Mass 360. They're enrolled in the appropriate policies, and everything's configured for them automatically. So we call it streamlined enrollment in our portal, and it truly does that for you, in addition to giving you some extra supervision within the portal and even additional restrictions and settings like we saw in that supervised section of our iOS policy. Can Mass 360 be used as a time clock to track employees' time? That is a great question. We have lots of companies that want to do that because of their end users all having mobile devices these days. The problem with that comes into play when we are looking at things like device timers. So iOS devices, for example, if we set a location-based policy to check in to a particular location, like maybe a work office, there's an evaluation time before that check-in actually happens. So it's possible that your end user's device checks into their home location and they drive to work, and maybe it's been 15 minutes, but their device hasn't checked in yet. That evaluation period may impact the time where you actually see them check in. So it's not going to be entirely accurate based on how these devices' heartbeats work. Now, if you want to maybe have an application pushed so that we're leveraging that application and they can kind of check in through that app, we've had customers do that. But leveraging the location of the device itself is not always a reliable way for companies to be, especially paying customers based on their check-in to their location. Is Mass 360 Enterprise Server meant to be in-house or in the cloud? Mass 360 is our data centers are located here in Pennsylvania. We are a cloud-based solution, so we don't require any servers in your environment. What's basically going to happen is we're going to set you up with access to an account from our data center. One thing that's very important to mention is that while we are a cloud-based solution, all of our resources are outbound only, and we do not require any appliances. We do not sit in line to any of your resources, and we do not host things like your email or your attachments or your applications or anything of that nature. So any company information is actually not being housed in our data center. We're simply providing access to the resource where that information is being housed. So for example, if you've got an on-prem Exchange server, we're not going to be rerouting that information. Your mail's not flowing through our cloud. We're simply taking that active sync configuration and sending it to your users who are supposed to have access to that resource. If you do have questions about our cloud-based solution or our data center security, we are happy for you to reach out to us and we can talk a little bit more about that and send you any white papers you might need. We are FedRAMP certified, we're FISMA certified, we are SOC 2 Type 2. We're also able to provide you with a FIPS 140-2 compliant container on your devices if that's of concern. Let's see, with having multiple buildings, is it possible to have different networks configured in Mass 360? Absolutely. So this can be very granular if you'd like. We have the ability to configure different policies with different networks. So if you'd like to provide one network per policy, we can break the policies out that way and distribute accordingly. Now, if we're using something like an Active Directory integration, we can pull in your departments that are already configured within your directory, and we can automatically assign policies that way, so that if maybe somebody from marketing is in building 1, maybe somebody from finance is in building 2, when those users enroll, marketing is going to get the policy for building 1, and finance is going to get the policy for building 2. So this can be very, very streamlined for your environment so that it's an automated process for onboarding and even offboarding people's devices. So that's certainly possible for you. Does Mass 360 support Windows devices? We absolutely do. From the laptop perspective, we support Windows XP Service Pack 3 or newer. We also do have Windows 10 support. We were day 0 ready for Windows 10. We also have policy for Windows 10 now, in addition to Windows Phone. So we essentially can configure your basic lock, locate, and wipe functionality in addition to delivering things like email configurations to your Windows 10 devices. We can set restrictions, and we can also enroll Windows Phone devices, and we'll just need a Company Hub certificate for that. And you can distribute applications. You can configure a dual persona if you'd like. We have lots of support for Windows devices today, and it's all within one portal. So when you log in, you get a complete inventory of all of your mobile devices in addition to any Windows devices that are enrolled. I have a pricing question here. That is something that we'd normally have you reach out to us, and we'd set up a call to really touch on what you're looking for, because our pricing can be in bundles, it can be a la carte. It really is dependent upon the features that you're looking for. So we can actually get you some pretty specific pricing. We just need to have a little bit of a better understanding of what you're looking for in an MDM perspective. Let's see, so how do we accomplish authentication between the device and the MDM server? That's something that we would typically be looking at, some sort of integration if you have a system already in place. That's something we need a little bit more information in terms of providers and what you're using currently, but we can certainly set up a call with you if you wanted to have a one-on-one conversation so that we can give you some specifics around how that communication would be accomplished with our MDM solution and being a cloud-based solution and accessing resources that you've already got in place. And it looks like I've gotten to all of the questions today. If there's anything that you think of or anything that we haven't been able to answer or anything that you need to reach out in regards to, please feel free. We host demos constantly for potential customers or people who are interested in our product. We're happy to go through one-on-one and specify exactly what's in your environment and how it would work with our product. So we encourage you to reach out so we can get you appropriate pricing or questions in regards to something that's specifically in your environment.
All right, thanks, Lindsay, and thank you everyone for your questions today. Just a reminder to watch your inbox for that email with the recording, and we hope to see you next time in the next demo in the series, excuse me. So on behalf of all of us here at IBM, we hope you enjoyed today's presentation and have a productive and secure rest of your day. Thanks again.
Thanks for your time.